who is a great taker.
Excellent.
Hello and welcome to the November 1st, 2018 Kubernetes community meeting. I am Tim Pepper from VMware. I work in SIG release and Contribex primarily at the moment. I will be hosting and moderating the discussion today. We could use a note taker today. We don't have a volunteer just yet. The Google Doc is accessible to all for editing. So anybody who's willing to, please drop your name in there as a primary note taker, but also anybody else that's a collaborative Google Doc. The volunteer help would be greatly appreciated. This is a recorded meeting and we are also streaming live, I believe, today as well. So please act in accordance with our code of conduct and know that this meeting will be out there for posterity on the internet. So first off today, we have a demo on Automation Broker from Michael Ravnak at redhat.com, I'll say, just following the email address that's posted there. Yeah, take it away.
Hey, thank you. All right, I'm going to share my slides here. So yeah, my name is Michael Ravnak, and I've been at Red Hat for 6.5 years. Get this going. Hopefully, somebody give me a yay or nay. You can see this.
Looking good.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Actually, it's the screen. I'm not sure. Are others seeing the screen correctly or clipped?
Looks fine to me.
Yeah, it looks fine.
Okay, fantastic. All right, well, we'll just roll with it. So I've been at Red Hat for 6.5 years. I work at the intersection of Kubernetes work and Ansible automation work. And going back since kind of the beginning of the container craze, have been working on various tooling at Red Hat and so on to manage the repositories in particular and tooling for distributing containerized content to our customers. So I've been in the container world in one way or another for a fair amount of time now. So let's talk about automation with service brokers. To start, we're just going to talk about this pattern real quick called a meta container as an app definition. So when you're provisioning something, and forgive me if we're going through this pretty quick, but I think you'll all follow along. When you're provisioning something, there's kind of 3 levels of complexity we can operate at. So there's, for one thing, just creating your full stack of like cluster resources. This is the YAML that you're going to create, the actual Kubernetes resources. You just got to figure out what deployments and services and physical volumes and stuff you need to create. These are the kind of things you would create those for, right? So the second thing you do that's a little more interesting is integrate with external services. Those kind of things might be legacy applications or a traditional database cluster maybe, or perhaps an appliance of some kind. And then to get even more exciting, you might need to do some kind of post-installation bootstrapping of your application. So maybe you're going to initialize a database. Maybe you're going to restore from a backup. We should all probably do that more often. Maybe you're going to create some resources in the application that you just provisioned. So boiling that down into what physical stuff do you need, this is just a list of all the things you need to have in one place when it is time to actually do your provisioning. So what kind of technology do we know about? What kind of like packaging format might we have at our disposal that you could use to bundle up all of this stuff, or at least most of this stuff, into one immutable thing so that you can have it at provision time. Well, of course, it's a container. So this is very simply the meta container pattern. It's the idea of creating a container that effectively is an installer and will install, provision your app, and potentially manage your app in your cluster. We call this thing a service bundle in our lingo because it bundles everything you need to deploy a service. It is a pod that runs to completion in your cluster, start to finish, and we expect it to exit. And at the end of when it exits, it should have done whatever it needs to do. It can do all the service catalog-y kind of things that we're going to look at. And here we are with the service catalog. Probably a lot of you are familiar with the service catalog. Here's a graphical representation from the OpenShift user interface, at least. The Kubernetes Service Catalog is really about enabling you to self-service provision whatever services you want to make available inside your clusters. You could, for example, give dev teams the ability to provision their own MySQL database anytime they want. Maybe it even has your special configuration for your corporate environment baked into it, perhaps. Yeah, that's what the Service Catalog is all about in a nutshell. And this is the pattern, and we'll see how this is all going to fit together in just a moment, but you have this client on the left with a smiley face, and they talk to the service catalog through some kind of user interface. And the service catalog is really just a middleman or middlewoman that has some number of brokers that tell it, hey, I have this service or these services to offer. Can you make that advertisable inside the cluster? And what we did is we made one broker that is actually pluggable, and we called it, okay, I'll get to that in a second. The Open Service Broker API. This is the protocol that we use for the service catalog and the brokers to communicate with each other. These are a bunch of the companies that have been heavily involved in shepherding that particular spec. It's just a nice like open source story to see them getting together every week or two and hammer that stuff out. So it's a very well-defined protocol. Now, the automation broker is one of those brokers, but rather than being hard-coded to be like a Postgres broker or a MySQL broker, what all it knows to do is make one service available and manage that. This can take any one of those service bundles or many of those service bundles and advertise them as a provisionable service in the service catalog. And so its source of data is just any old container registry. You can build these service bundles, and we have tooling that we'll look at that can help you do that, and customize them to do whatever kind of special things you need them to do, deploy your services or even common services in particular ways that meet your needs, and then advertise them in the service catalog. In the service bundle, we basically talked about this, but we do have a tool called APB, and the name will become clear in a moment, that can help you get one off the ground and then help you with the development process of it. It really is quite easy. So here's that tool. If we ran APB init and give it a name, it will create us a whole skeleton, including this metadata file. If you've ever used or looked at Helm, for example, they have, I think it's what, charts.yaml. This is a similar kind of metadata file. You give it a description, a name, and this parameters list at the bottom here is where some of the real magic happens. That's where you can express in a rich way what parameters your service wants to receive at provision time. And then a service catalog user interface can render like a rich form, wizard style, and have the end user who's trying to provision something fill out that form with whatever information you need. And it really turns into a very powerful experience. So the Ansible Playbook bundle is what we really specialized in. That's where the APB acronym comes from. We found that Ansible works exceptionally well in this role. It really is, for one, just a very easy way to manage workloads on Kubernetes to begin with. But in this role, we basically use Ansible inside this meta container as the thing that runs and does stuff. And each of the actions that you can perform through the service catalog just maps one-to-one to a playbook. So you can make an Ansible playbook called provision.yaml, and whatever it does is what will happen. and you have at your disposal the full power of Ansible at this point. So it's not just being able to create and manage resources in your cluster, but you could integrate with those off-cluster resources, for example, or do more advanced things. Or you could, for example, connect to your database after you've created it and create user accounts inside the database, or create an actual database in Postgres, or do whatever other kind of application-specific operations you want to do at provision time. But that said, Ansible is not the only thing you can run in here. It's a container, so you can really run anything. And in fact, I did a fair amount of work to run Helm inside one of these service bundles. And we have a YouTube channel where you could check out some videos of how that worked out. Okay, the user experience kind of varies. Don't squint too hard at this. This is more just, there is a command line interface. I want to make you aware of it. This is kind of what it looks like. You know, it works. You can get real stuff done with it. It's not the most beautiful, but it works, and for what it does, it can be very handy. This is Cube Apps, which some of you may be familiar with, more as a from the Helm world, as a Helm chart catalog, but they've also added some functionality to support the Kubernetes Service Catalog. Last chance I had to look at it, it was not fully baked, but they're still working on it. And then the OpenShift user experience is the full, very rich user experience in terms of offering all the rich form support and rich parameterization of things. Okay, so that's the current state of affairs of what the automation broker is. It's kind of a whirlwind. So I'm going to spend my last minute talking about the future, the next thing that we're working on that's available now in not quite as mature of a state as the automation broker is. But it's taking Ansible or similar things and putting it into the operator pattern. Very quickly, the operator pattern is another way to self-service provision, but instead of using this Open Service Broker API, you use CRDs. You create a CRD for your application, and then instances of that custom resource. For example, you might make a MySQL resource type, and I could create one, and in that record I create, I describe what I want my deployment to look like. And then the operator sees that come into life. And the operator is really just a controller. It's a special kind of controller. It will then go do whatever's necessary in its reconciliation loop to deploy your application, but then actively manage it and do full day two management. And so we created an operator that has Ansible inside it, so you can do anything you want inside your Ansible roles or playbooks, and that becomes the logic for your operator. This is how easy it is to do Ansible, to use Ansible to manage workloads in Kubernetes. On the left is just a config map, as you'd stuff in a kubectl, for example. On the right is the same thing. As you would see it written out in Ansible, I templatized one thing just for fun. But just want to highlight that it is really, really easy and feels really natural to manage this stuff in Ansible. And that's my 10-minute whirlwind. So what questions do you guys have?
Folks on the call, feel free to ask questions now. And also, at the point we carry on in the meeting, you could ask questions in the chat if things still come to your mind.
Great. Okay, I see one thing. And okay, yep. Great. So I have to get off the call in the near future, so I won't be here for the full meeting to answer questions. But if anybody would like to start asking questions in the chat, I'm very happy to answer all the questions I see there before I leave. Otherwise, in the chat, there's our website and our IRC channel on Freenode. Go to
Okay. If no one has any questions, we will carry on. Thank you, Michael.
All right. Thank you.
So next up, our normal standing agenda. After demos, we go into release updates. I believe there's a conflict. Do we not have Aish today?
Oh, I'm here.
Okay.
Prioritize this one. Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Cool. So quick updates on 1.13. We cut our third alpha yesterday. We had quite a few alphas this time, mainly to give our branch manager shadows a run at the tools and builds. So we had a third alpha cut yesterday. You can find a link to the bits there. As of upcoming dates, we are quickly rolling into the second half of the release. This is when this whole short release gets, the week gets mushed a little bit. So next week, next Tuesday, we are cutting our beta 0 for 113, which means our release branch will be ready and the branch manager will start daily fast forwards to the release branch. This is highly dependent on clean CI signal, which I'll get to in a bit. And the other upcoming date is Code Slush, which is also coming up next Friday, which is 11/9. So call out to all the enhancement owners to please evaluate all the pending work for your enhancements. And this is code, test, and docs. If you feel it's comfortable enough to land in 113, that's great, because code freeze is just 2 weeks away. If you feel you need the enhancement adjusted, please work with the release team to push it out to future milestones if there's a need. On the same lines, please ensure that the PRs are up to date in terms of labels, specifically SIG, kind, priority, and milestone. Starting next Friday, once Code Slush kicks in, Tide will start enforcing these merge labels as a requirement to get your PR merged. So it'll be great if you could update your PRs with the labels and also the corresponding issues so that they match up. Finally, on CI Signal, I have a link to this week's report that Josh sent out. On the whole, we are kind of looking good. We have new issues cropping up, but we also had a couple of long-standing issues being closed thanks to auto-scaling and cluster lifecycle for closing out a couple of those issues. So we do have one beta blocker at this point, which is scheduler priority test that's been failing for a couple of weeks now. But a fix just went in, and we are hopeful that it's going to turn green. But if it doesn't, then we might have to log beta or take other actions accordingly. We also had GK upgrade failures across the board, but now it's determined that it is a GK specific issue, so it's not a blocker. The final piece of information that I would like to get out there is we are looking into shuffling the jobs in the release blocking dashboard. Historically, the release team has been looking at and relying on CI signals from a lot of flaky, long-running, and seemingly unmaintained tests, and making go-no-go decisions based on that. Towards that, in 113, Aaron helped us tighten these criteria for getting jobs into release blocking dashboard. There's a link to the PR there. And that went in last week. So as next steps, we will be moving out some of those jobs that we think fall into non-blocking category into newer dashboards. This doesn't mean that we won't be looking into it, but this is mainly to, at a minimum, keep the blocking dashboard pretty solid so that the release team can have a clear no-go signal if things in that turn red. But we also will be looking at the other dashboards just more so to gather data as to are we getting any useful information from those jobs and see how we want to proceed with them in the future release cycles. So yeah, I expect more jobs to be moving around in the next few weeks. And we also had a couple of patch releases. 111.4 and 112.2 went out last week. That's it from me.
All right, thank you, Aish, for the update.
Thank you. And yeah, if you have any questions, more than happy to take.
And also the SIG release channel on Slack has been quite active. There's a lot going on in SIG release at the moment in terms of improvements in the process, and it's really great to see the momentum there.
There's a question here.
So yeah, I just was wondering if all these GKE tests are still considered as blockers.
Right now, they are there in the blocking dashboard, and we do take a look at them every release and make a informed decision as to is it a real issue or not. So that's the whole idea behind splitting them.
All right, we will move on. So next on the agenda typically is to talk about or highlight a KEP. And this week, Caleb, I believe you are on the call. Is there anything you'd like to briefly say about the transition that's going on there?
Yeah. Hey, all. We have been in single architecture working a lot on how to improve the KEP process for the community. One of the things we want to do as an incremental step is to begin the extraction from the community repo of existing KEP content. So there's a link there to a dev discussion if you want more information about how that impacts you. But the TLDR is that we are going to try and get as much content merged as possible. So trying to have small merges that document consensus rather than trying to have a fully complete idea before you can merge the pull request. Will be more updates to follow there, but that's the TLDR for folks today. Try and get your content merged as quickly as possible.
So I believe I saw in one of the recent SIG architecture discussions also that we're probably going to finally start transitioning to KEPs as the official way, like KEPs currently state they're an optional path.
I don't know if there is going to be guidance coming down from SIG architecture to mandate the use of KEPs.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. That is going to be the official way.
Well, Brian said it, so he's on the hook for any blowback there. So.
I think this is a good thing. It gives great clarity, and having those documented out there for people to see and discuss it, it's fantastic. All right, thank you, Caleb. Then I think if there are any questions there, we could pause for just a moment. All right, then. So next we will move into our SIG updates. We have a number of SIGs this week, AWS scheduling and contributor experience. We'll start with SIG AWS and Nishi Davidson.
Hey, Tim. Could you hear me?
Yep, we have you. And I really appreciate you doing this, even though you have a cold.
Sorry, everyone. I sound like a frog in a well, but hopefully you'll forgive me for that. 1 second. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, great. So as a summary, I just wanted to give a broad description of SIG AWS goals.
Actually, are you showing slides? We may have the wrong part of your screen. We're seeing some Outlook.
Sorry.
And there they are.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so wanted to talk through the broad description of SIG AWS goals as we listed in the charter, which is expected to close this week. The SIG AWS team is expected to be responsible for all the integrations, any type of interfaces like the CNI, CSI, CRI work that we would plan to do, any libraries or tools that allows Kubernetes to integrate with AWS services. We're also taking on the work of Prow, Test Grid, and Perf dashboard integrations so that we can show proper CI signal for any releases that happen from our side for our tools. We also provide user group support for multiple Kubernetes issues and any feature requests that specifically involve AWS and Kubernetes per se. We're taking on the work of fulfilling any additional documentation requests for Kubernetes relevant to AWS that's missing today from Kubernetes.io. So currently we have 5 sub-projects in SIG AWS. Of these, we're releasing 3 alpha releases in Kubernetes 1.13. And these include AWS ELB Egress Controller, AWS EBS CSI Driver, and the out-of-tree cloud provider CCM binary. So we're hoping we could do the alpha releases for all 3 sub-projects in 1.13. As Ash pointed out, we're working towards the CI signal so that all the tests are visible on Test Grid right now. As of August this quarter, there was a leadership change. I was voted in as one of the SIG leads. I think everybody is aware of that, but we hadn't discussed it in the last community update. Also, our charter, as I mentioned earlier, is expected to close this week. We're in the last lap of doing that. So wanted to give a summary of all the sub-projects. So first take the AWS Egress Controller. As I said, we are planning to do an alpha release in 1.13. We have stabilized the support for the IP target mode. So there is obviously the instance target mode, which is the normal support for node mode. But we also added support for pod IP target mode, which allows the traffic to be routed from ALB directly to the pod IP without requiring any hop that a node port might bring into the design. So what this particular project does is for any ingress creation, an AWS ALB is automatically created, and internal or external HTTP traffic can be routed into the cluster. So other than that, we've also refactored the complete code base. We use the controller runtime library, which was a library, a Go library introduced by SIG API machinery. And we also added a feature that allows AWS SDK level caching. We essentially made sure that this caching allows the ingress controller to not make multiple calls to AWS services, rather store the information and be more optimal when processing ingresses in the cluster. What we plan to do in the future after the alpha release happens, we want to add more docs. Of course, we will add sub docs and also CI signal for this current alpha release for the egress controller. But going forward, also, we want to maintain more docs and make sure that all our users have enough information about the ingress controller. Additionally, there has been a lot of requests from customers to actually share one ALB across multiple ingresses that might be running in different namespaces. Today, there is a one-to-one mapping between one ingress and one ALB. So we hope to add that feature support in Q1 2019. And we are also thinking about proposing the ingress controller as a binary that can sit inside the out-of-tree CCM for cloud provider AWS, but that's still in a discussion mode. That's something we want to resolve going forward. So the main people working on this particular project are Yang and Craig from Ticketmaster, and most of us are from AWS who are supporting this particular project. The second project I want to highlight is the AWS EBS CSI Driver. We're working with Saad and David from Google in order to align with the spec and make it. And we're also working with Jan and Fabio from Red Hat to make sure that the design is well done. Mostly the work is being done by Cheng from AWS. We've added features like storage class parameters into the CSI driver, different FS type, volume type, encrypted volume. We've also added support for volume scheduling. We've done the initial integration so that CI signal is visible to the SIG release team. And the next step is we're going to complete basic integration testing so that the alpha release can be completed. We are also working with David and Deep in Docker in order to enable the CSI migration. Basically, what this means is today there is a volume controller which is part of the in-tree cloud controller manager. And when we do introduce the CSI driver for EBS, we want to make sure that users have a seamless way to migrate from that volume controller implementation to the CSI driver. So we will be adding a library in order to make that migration seamless. And this is the work that we are jointly doing with Google and Docker. The third sub-project is the external cloud provider CCM binary. Today, the in-tree CCM binary does not have any end-to-end tests for AWS. We're working towards changing that so that we can be seamless and we can have parity with all the other cloud providers. And our plan is to maintain this in-tree CCM until the out-of-tree CCM is GA in Q3 2019. So we expect a deprecation period of 2 releases. We're also working on the out-of-tree CCM. We expect to extract that and essentially do an alpha release in 1.13. We're also helping basically move all the cloud provider dependencies from Kubernetes/Kubernetes to Kubernetes utils and staging. This is the joint work that we're doing with all our cloud provider friends. And then there is a lot of work to be done to scope end-to-end testing for out-of-tree CCM, and also integrate that CI signal to test grid. That's also work in progress, and we plan to make good progress this quarter before we move forward in Q1 2019. Apart from that, we've realized that for SIG AWS, all the sub-projects as well as the E2E test signal is completely, it's fully missing. And we've had multiple requests from people to do something about this. So for now, what we've done is we've added an AWS Tester plugin into Test Infra. It's basically a kubetest deployer interface. And what it does is it creates an ephemeral EKS cluster to run Kubernetes E2E tests, all as periodic jobs. We were advised by the community to not run these jobs as pre-submit jobs or post-submit jobs, but run them as periodic jobs so they don't become blocking. These will be used for all the SIG AWS sub-project CI signal for 1.13 release as well as going forward. We're hoping to implement etcd conformance tests using the same plugin. And we also expect to integrate the cluster API work going forward to standardize testing around all of Kubernetes E2E. Apart from that, I just want to give an update on the homepage, the Slack channel, and the Google groups. Our chairs are Justin, Chris, and me. So if you have any questions, feel free to ping us on Slack or also reach out directly to us, and we'll be more than happy to help.
All right, thank you. I would ask that you put a link, if you can post your slides somewhere online, put a link to them in the minutes today. It would be useful. You've got great content there, and it's more efficient than trying to duplicate it word for word in the notes.
Okay, great, will do.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to carry on to make sure that we get through things. SIG scheduling is next. Bobby, I see you are on the line.
Let me see. This is here. All right, so I'm going to go over the items that we delivered in 1.12 and what we're going to deliver in 1.13 and what we're working on basically these days. One of the major things that we did in 1.12 was to improve scheduler performance. Basically, we increased the scheduler throughput. Two major features was delivered to do so. One is the percentage of nodes that we score. Basically, the scheduler used to score all the nodes of the cluster every time for all the pods that it schedules. With this feature, there is a config flag that by default is set to 50%. Basically, once the scheduler finds 50% of the nodes as feasible, it stops its search for more feasible nodes and starts scoring those ones that it has found. So as a result, the throughput of the scheduler has increased. In order to do this, we have implemented a fairly sophisticated iterator that goes over nodes in various zones or regions and failure domains, basically, to ensure that we give all these nodes in various failure domains a fair chance of getting considered for each pod. Another important performance improvement that is implemented in 1.12 is affinity and anti-affinity. We have seen over 100x performance improvement after these algorithmic improvements. This was one of the major performance issues that the scheduler had. And with these new additions, one of the biggest hurdles in improving performance of the scheduler or using affinity and anti-affinity, and we're specifically talking about interpod affinity and anti-affinity, is now removed. We graduated tainting nodes by condition to beta. So this is a feature that allows nodes to get tainted when certain conditions happen to nodes. For example, when they become not ready or there is a network issue and so on. So we add taints to the node. So this helps us make the logic similar to other taint management, basically. Once the nodes are tainted, then pods can have toleration or not tolerate certain things. So this helps managing pods more efficiently. Another feature that we have delivered in 1.12 is image locality function. So what it does is that basically it prefers nodes which already have the images for a pod. Let's say that a pod arrives, the scheduler considers all the nodes in the cluster, and some of the nodes are visible. Among these nodes, a node that already has some of the images or a certain percentage of the images at the pod is preferred. This is actually a kind of like a controversial feature because some people believe that if there are, let's say, nodes that are in the cluster, and let's say you schedule the first pod of a replica set on that node, then that node is going to get the images of the pod, and then all the other pods may get automatically attracted to that node. We've ensured that we've properly set the weight of this priority function versus other spreading priority functions to ensure that we give all the nodes a reasonable chance. Of course, there is still some interest or gravity sort of towards the nodes that have the images already. We also finalized the design of the scheduling framework. I don't know if people are familiar with this effort or not, but the idea of the scheduling framework is that they're making changes to the scheduler architecture so that most of its features become like plugins for the scheduler. For now, we have focused on in-process plugins. Basically, these are the plugins that are placed in certain directories in the scheduler code and are compiled with the scheduler. But the idea here is that for those people who want to customize the scheduler, they don't need to worry about the rest or the interface between these plugins and the rest of the scheduler. Hopefully, they don't need to do much really when they want to manage new changes in the scheduler in their code base. These are most of the items in 1.12. If there is any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Otherwise, I'll go towards the next part, which is what we are working on for 1.13. All right, for 1.13, we're trying to finalize the design of gang scheduling and having an early prototype. The gang scheduling is basically, or as we call it these days, co-scheduling, is a feature that that allows us to schedule batch jobs more efficiently. A lot of batch jobs need to get scheduled together. So, for example, there are some machine learning workloads that, if they are not all scheduled together, they cannot progress. So you either have to schedule, let's say, 10 pods at the same time, or if you schedule 9, they're not going to progress. They just consume resources for no reason. So that's the idea behind gang scheduling. We're trying to basically implement this so that either all these pods that are required scheduled together or none of them is scheduled. We're also finalizing pod scheduling policies. The scheduling policies are a set of policies that allows administrators to define some policies for the placement of pods on nodes. For example, an admin might want to say that pod in this particular namespace should never get scheduled on a particular zone, and things of that sort. Or they may want to prevent users from setting certain tolerations on their pods, and so forth. So these are some of the stuff that we're working on. This is actually, we're working with the policy work group to finalize this design. We've been actually iterating over multiple designs, and we haven't finalized it yet. But the PRs are out. There is a kit out that we are still working on. We are deprecating critical pod annotation in 1.13. Critical pod annotation was an alpha feature that was enabled by default in PKE and probably in some other places that was used for marking some pods as critical. So mostly our system pods basically were getting marked as critical in the past with this particular annotation. But now that we have pod priority and preemption, we no longer need this feature. As a result, we're deprecating it, and we're hoping that we can completely remove it in 1.13. We are enabling another priority function for the scheduler that allows the scheduler to prefer nodes that can fit pod limits. So today, the scheduler only cares about pod requests. So if a pod request fits on a node, the node is considered feasible, well, assuming that the pod doesn't have any other scheduling requirements. But now we are also adding this priority function that prefers nodes who can also fit the pod limits. Of course, this is just a preference. It's not a requirement. Okay. We are also implementing a couple of extension points as a part of implementing the scheduling framework in 1.13. These are just implementing the extension points. We are probably not going to have any plugins for these extension points in 1.13, given that 1.13 is supposed to be mostly like scheduling release. We are working on also changing the equivalence cache design. We had this equivalence cache in the scheduler, which was an alpha feature, but our investigations showed that it was not improving the scheduler throughput much. It was adding major complexities in the scheduler code. We decided to change that completely. We removed it and replaced it with a new design. We're working on that design, and hopefully we can have an end version in 1.13. These are all.
All right. Thank you for the update, and right on time. Next on the agenda then is Paris Pittman from the Contributor Experience SIG.
Hi, everyone. I am going to share my screen here. And let me know if you see it.
Yep.
We good? All right. I'm actually not going to go into presentation mode. I'm going to toggle with some of my tabs at the top. All right. Hi, everyone. As Tim said, my name is Paris. I work at Google. I am here today to do the Contributor Experience Community Update. First things first, I'm going to start with what we did last cycle and what we've been up to in general. One of our major active themes is making your life easier, whether that's a chair, tech lead, a casual contributor, first-time contributor, etc. And we do that by automating things where we can, documenting them where we can't automate them, mentoring in many different areas and events, and all kinds of other fun stuff that you're going to hear about in a second. The one major thing that we did last cycle was create, distribute, and ultimately complete the survey. The survey was very extensive. We got a lot of feedback that it was very long. Hopefully in the future it will not be as long, but we wanted to get as much comprehensive information that we possibly could. And yes, pretty graphs are coming. They're on the way. And I do have a little snapshot for you. This is one graph. One of the questions was, what are blockers for you in the contribution process? And we broke them down by level because we asked people what their level was as well for the survey. So you can see from this that approvers, for instance, think that debugging test failures is their biggest blocker that they have in the contribution process. And then also you can see that, let's pick one. Org members also probably feel the same as well. I'm sure that everybody loves a good test debugging session every now and then. But yeah, these are the charts that will eventually come out. They have a lot to do. They have a lot to go with design, but they are coming. Just some quick bits of information that we learned from from the survey. Meetups are out of scope for us. We did get a lot of people who said that meetups need some attention. Guess what? That's CNCF, but we will take that information to CNCF. Another thing that we saw a lot of was that people said that they do not use the good first issue or help wanted labels because they didn't set the issue and they weren't the author of the issue. Yes, you can apply both of those, and they are extremely helpful to us if you do that. We did have a session I think it was either last community meeting or the meeting before that, where Aaron demoed both of those issues. Please use those. We also found out that Slack is extremely welcomed by our survey takers. We had 162 survey takers. 82% of them said that yes, it's very useful for both users and contributors. So we do have a community of Slack lovers. New contributors really like the release section of the community meeting, and current contributors really like the announcements. So congratulations to the release team for always doing an awesome snippet for us in this community meeting. And then also we had folks who said that we should fix the technical problems of Kubernetes. we are not that sick, y'all. So I just wanted to let you know. I tweeted that recently because it was such a funny that I was like, I've got to tweet this. So there's plenty of other funnies. The data is there in that link. Feel free to do what you like with the data. It has been scrubbed. Have at it. And yes, when the pretty graphs are official, we will do a blog post. We will also do an announcement on KDev, so please look out for that. All right, we did a steering committee election. I'm not going to go into that just because of time. We made GitHub management an official sub-project. Click there for the complete list of services. We created a team of admins. That's awesome. Thanks to Christoph for all his hard work here, Aaron, Bob Killian, Steven, so many folks that have been helping us with that. We've created a project board. We've cut our meetings down by 20 to 30 minutes less because of the way we've been doing a little bit more project management stuff. And we've also created a new meeting time that's friendly to our Asia, not locations, I meant contributors. And that worked out really well. We had about 13 people join us at 8 p.m. Pacific on the fourth Wednesday, which is really awesome. We've kicked off planning for Shanghai New Contributor Workshop and the Seattle Contributor Summit, which I'll get into more detail in a second. We've also made major changes to how we moderate and set up our communication platforms. Yes, we've had bad actors. Yes, we have a lot of spam. And yes, we do know that. However, all of the stuff that we're progressing forward with this makes our community as safe as possible, because we are a public open source project, so we should be public as possible. However, we do need to take into consideration spam and things like that. So we've applied a lot of our Kubernetes dev mailing list moderation processes and procedures to all of the mailing list processes and procedures. If you're a chair, please get up to speed with this stuff. If you do not know how to kick a bad actor off your Zoom call, or if you do not know how to moderate your mailing lists, please reach out to us. You have micro communities and they should be managed accordingly. Other things that we've done, launched regional boards for discuss.kubernetes.io. This means we now have a forum that can be located anywhere in the world without firewalls or other garden walls, if you will. So please check that out. That's really awesome, and get the word out about that. Feel free to post there as well. And yes, when you post, those posts get picked up by Google search results. We continue to improve our regular programs. Those are things like office hours, meet our contributors, the community meeting. For meet our contributors, we've added a steering committee session. That's an AMA. That's really wonderful. We did a code-based tour with Stefan with Kubernetes time that's already have like 500 plus hits on YouTube. It's doing awesome. Community meeting, this one here. We've done an announcement section, a KEP section, a contributor tips section. So constantly improving this meeting. We've kicked off the outreachy mentorship initiative. That's Nikita and I and Brendan Burns. We'll have more updates in a second about that. Google Summer of Code started and ended since the last time we presented. Marco presented his project at a previous community meeting. Check how awesome that is out. This is the kind of work that we can get out of Google Summer of Code students. Dev stats, we've cleaned up dashboards, added more definition to the bottom of the charts, and created a start of a README. And also regular audits of our communication platforms. And I mentioned this earlier with like the bad actors and things like that. This takes a lot of time, just to audit the Zoom accounts that we have, which we have about 45. It takes about 40 hours at least of work. So if you are a chair and or a tech lead that's taking advantage of some of the infrastructure that we have, please get up to speed there. And we're starting to audit them. One of the reasons why we do not have a public calendar right now is because of the bad actors, and because bad actors comb Twitter for open Zoom links. This is a known Zoom issue. We've actually been working with Zoom distinguished engineers on this issue to fast track some security related protocols. If you see people tweeting our Zoom links, please tell them not to. There are other ways that people can get into our meetings if they really want to get into them, but tweeting them is not the best bet there. All right, and I know I'm talking so fast, but our team does so much work, y'all. I'm so excited about it. Upcoming cycles by sub-project, general SIG stuff. We hope to have our charter merged this week. We are continuing to build out project management aspects of our group, and we're going to be using a lot of that survey data to do so. Survey data is in use. And then we're also, as Kayla mentioned before, taking KEPs and design proposals out of the community repo, and we're going to be doing an intro and deep dive session at KubeCon Seattle. As far as contributor documentation, which is one of our sub-projects, we're going to be revamping the developer guide, which we are hiring an outreach intern to do. So stoked for that. Continuous improvements to the contributor guide, as always. We are launching a contributor site. CNCF is hiring us a contractor to apply the theme. The back end is largely complete. And then more code-based tour videos, which I've included a link in there, and I would love to get everybody's feedback on what we should do code-based tours of, because they are so popular. Events sub-project, we work hard on contributor summits. This contributor summit in Seattle is already waitlisted. That means we have over 400 people that are interested. And I'm going to tell you all in a minute what we need from you there, but this is going to be a really awesome one. We have many tracks, hands-on tracks, birds of a feather, new contributor workshop, etc. We've also added on a night beforehand because everybody said that the hallway track is the best track. So do we. We like to hang out with y'all. So that's an added addition this time. And then we've also added a new contributor workshop to KubeCon Shanghai that's now sold out as well. Plus there's a current contributor get together afterwards. Please check KDEV mailing list for anything related to new contributor workshop there. And then communication stuff that we've got going on. We are creating a guide to communicating with Kubernetes. This is going to be an upgraded communications.md doc. We've been doing a ton of work on discovery of all of our communication channels. We have over 200 Google groups. That's just to give you a tip of the iceberg. We have all intentions of improving chair and tech lead SIG processes, which is managing your micro communities. This is updating your docs. This is make sure that you do not have as much as administrivia as you do currently. We're currently finishing and testing a new Zoom to YouTube automation process, so you don't have to manually update those things. Also testing a new calendar and shared doc process and so much more. If you have opinions or things on this, please reach out to us. The next, of course, is our GitHub sub-management project that's constantly ongoing, figuring out ways to automate your life, to manage your teams, and to do all the awesome things that you do via PR. Everything, like I said before, that if you'd like to read up on the services this sub-project provides, please do so. It's on, I think, one of the first slides of this deck. But of course, we plan to continue to migrate towards automation for new members of the organization. And again, big thanks to folks who volunteered to sit on that team. Mentoring, we're adding Nikita to the owners file there because she's awesome and she does so much work for us. And we're going to be continuing to think about ways to grow people into owners files. There's a ton of open issues. Would love to get a lot of your support and feedback here. And then I'm planning on launching the MVP of the one-on-one hour and group mentoring. All of those issues are there. I'd love to get everybody on board with that. This is the stuff on how we grow our people, y'all. So it's very important that we have all hands on deck. If you are not mentoring right now, please see me so that we can get you involved in a program. A lot of the programs that we have established take consideration into your time. The survey did come back with a lot of you that said that you just don't have the time to mentor. Guess what? A lot of this stuff means only 1 hour of your life every quarter. It's very doable. And if all hands are on deck, so if everyone, for instance, that was eligible to vote, so all 700 people were a mentor, then we would have triple that in people who can help review and approve PRs. So please, let's try to do better with mentoring. So how do these plans affect you? Again, I kind of just hit on the first bullet. All of these mentoring programs will affect how contributors are moving up the ladder. Give us feedback, help us recruit mentors, sign up to mentor here. Requirements of being a mentor, you only need one merge pull request. Why only one? Because anyone and all should be mentors. So if you've only merged one, that means you can mentor a new contributor. Please sign up. That was another thing that came back from the survey that I'll provide the data on, is there were so many people that said that they didn't know enough to mentor. If you've had one merged PR here, you know enough to mentor. We're also going to communicate even more. We learned from the survey that there was plenty of you that didn't know about certain things that we feel like we communicate a lot about. Yes, we know that we have a lot of communication channels. So if you feel like we're being spammy, please let us know. But these are our main communication arteries. So if you feel like you're not hearing enough about contributor experience, check to see if you're on these channels. If you're not, then get on them. If you're a chair, a tech lead, or a sub-project owner, this is super critical for you. If you plan on going to the Contributor Summit in Seattle, please reach out to us at community at kubernetes.io as soon as possible. We only have a limited number of spots left, and those are saved for those folks. And then also, when we do more exercises like new contributor workshops, outreach applications, et cetera, that are bringing in an influx of new folks, make sure that you are using your good first issue labels and your help wanted labels. They're poking around and looking for things to work on, and this is how you do it. So how can you help us? We have good first issue and help wanted labels in our repo, which is in the community repo. File issues when something isn't right for you or you have a suggestion. And also use the role board for any roles that your SIG might have that are outside of help wanted and good first issue labels. Things like someone to make graphics for you for decks, for meetings, for SIGs. It's really just it's endless. Feel free to use that. There's plenty of people, like 17,000 to be exact, who are looking for work within Kubernetes. Chairs, please upload your meetings to YouTube, fix your Zoom settings, and don't forget about your community meeting updates. Where to find us? We have an open mic every Wednesday at 10 a.m. I didn't fill in the UTC number there with the XXX, sorry. And then fourth Wednesday of the month is now 8 p.m. Pacific. We have a Slack channel. We have a mailing list. Get a hold of me, Elsie, Christoph, Garrett. Find us. That's my update.
Thank you, Paris. I know that's a lot of information there. We really appreciate what you and the SIG do to help grow the community. So next on the agenda, we only have a couple minutes. We've hit our one announcement recorded. Keps are moving. We talked about that earlier with Caleb. That brings us to shoutouts. Nikita would like to thank DIMS for making a point of being friendly to Asia and EU and setting the time for the meeting for the Kate's Infra team. Mohammed, a shout out to Mr. Bobby Tables for his help with Kubernetes 101 in Bangalore. It looked like that was a very successful event. I saw pictures with a ton of people there. Josh Burkus to Justin Santa Barbara for continuing to be the difficult to test fail resolver. And also to Lubomir Neelit123 for fast turnaround on KubeADM test failures. I know the release team appreciates everything that folks do to triage issues. Feda, shout out to Ben the Elder for finally creating a T-Hawk and emoji. I haven't seen that yet. I've got to go look for it. Awesome. Liz to Ben the Elder for going above and beyond to help get some KIND, Kubernetes and Docker tests working. Paris, thanks to Nikita, Roy Kai, Brendan Burns, Dibs, and many others for answering questions for the first-time contributors in the Outreachy Slack. SpiffX Aaron to Audrey Lim for tackling end-to-end test error messages as a first PR. Awesome to see new contributors, especially with something potentially super complex like that. And one last one from me to Solly Ross. Thank you very much for your note-taking today. With that, we are at the end of our agenda and basically at the end of our time slot. So thank you everybody for bringing information and presenting today. And thank you all for joining. We'll have the meeting up on YouTube hopefully very soon. Have a great day wherever you are in the world.
Happy Thursday.